Good morning. This is the Blaine's World Podcast, where conversations are worth hearing and seeing. And what we'll be doing each week, we post this on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and get more information in past episodes if you visit my website, which is behind me, blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, coming to you from my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week, we share positive views and uplifting stories about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Rod Richards as my guest today. And Rod, you can feel free to wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this on YouTube or Facebook, wherever they're watching us. Rod is a sixth career State of New Jersey employee, and so sixth decade, I guess, career. How long will you stay?
Four decade.
Four decades.
Six decade, I would be a little older.
Well, I read it wrong. Ex career. Well, it's something you were probably what the youngest guy who ever worked for New Jersey. You started at the age of
Well,
seven.
it's funny. I was so young. It was 1970. They made me walk over to the State House and sign a statement that I would be loyal to the state of New Jersey.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, do that then. He's also an author of nine books, an independent book publisher, a community activist for world peace, a recent widower, and a loving father and grandfather. Met him, Rod, I guess we met in the 80s sometime?
80s, 90s, yeah, when you started training mediators.
Okay, and Rod was one of my outstanding dispute resolution mediators, and I can't believe we've stayed in touch since then. It's pretty very
Yeah, it's
cool.
been a long time.
Okay, so Rod, the question I always ask first time I meet somebody, or you and I have talked before on the air, is as a kid, you grew up where?
Basically in the Trenton, New Jersey area, capital city of New Jersey. And as a street kid, pretty much semi-poor, so kind of like roam the streets, Catholic upbringing. So church every day, at church and church before school every morning of every day. So religious upbringing.
And so when you were a kid growing up, did you always know you wanted to work for the in government or for the city or state?
No. Blaine, I am still to this day a person who basically solely goes with the flow. You know, things come my way and I either accept them, reject them, or move along, do something, and that's the kind of person I am. In fact, uh, to to make the point, I've written 9 books, but they are all what you call pantsters books, Pantsers. I write by the seat of my pants.
Okay.
I start on a blank page and I just continue writing.
When
Some people do outlines and big, uh, you know, uh, um, descriptions and things like that. Nope, I just go from the beginning to the end, and then I go back and edit, and there's my book.
when you write, do you write every day? Do you get up in the morning to write
Pretty
a couple
much
hours a
every
day?
day. I've written 4 books of poetry, so I always write some poems every day. I read a lot, especially on the internet, the news, and articles about science and religion and current events. Try to keep my mind fresh and going.
And so when you get up in the morning, do you set aside a couple hours a day to write or just
It's not like that. It's more because I'm retired now. I have no demands on my time except, just like you, the old doctor's appointments and things like that. Um, except for them, I'm pretty much on my own time. So I write as I feel, as the spirit moves me. As I have time, I'm watching a TV show, I get an idea, I write a poem. That kind of thing.
one of the things that always impressed me though, Rod, is the fact that not only do you write, but over the last several years, now you help a lot of other writers. You work with them.
I have. I really like that. And you know why? And I started a weekly writing class at our local library in 12 years ago. And it's still going on today, as a matter of fact. And the reason why is because I found out that I learned by attending those writing classes, by listening to others and helping critique and hearing ideas and hearing tidbits about writing better and things like that. So I learned, and my belief is that the teacher learns by 90%, and it's always been true for me.
Well, so when you run this group, are these people who write poetry or they write all different subjects?
Everything. Poetry, nonfiction, fiction, mystery, thrillers. One guy, I helped him write his book. It was in my class. He had a he had a personal case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And so very interesting stuff. So I've done a lot of good, interesting things like that.
And talk about also what you do, which is so impressed me. You not only work with them, but you actually help them get published.
I do. I have my own publishing company. I started that in 2012 so that I could publish my own books, quite frankly. My first book was published in 2013, my memoir. And as it turned out, I had skills for helping writers, editing their work and improving it. And so I've helped, I don't know, 20, 25 writers edit their books and also publish their books with my publishing skills.
Now, the only problem with writing your memoir, though, in several years ago, that's volume one. You're now going to have to write, the second one.
Well, yeah, that's true. Memoirs are segments of a person's life. They're not the whole life like a biography. Um, but uh, I haven't started on the second memoir yet. I just reissued my first memoir, a period of 17 years from essentially 1979 to about, well, whatever 17 years is. Uh, and revamped it, brought it up to modern language styles and things like that. So I haven't looked at the next 17 years quite yet.
So I remember reading that book. I was fascinated by it. I mean, you had, at that point in time, you had lived some life, other than, just being this dedicated employee for the government, you had this whole separate other life, which I knew nothing about. It was fascinating.
Yeah, it's we all have what I hope we all have a passion. And I guess growing up religious, I grew up Catholic school and stuff. I guess that gave me the idea that essentially, or the belief that there's only one God, there's only one human race. We're all part of one family. So why can't we live in cooperation and peace? And so the Baha'i faith, when I discovered that in 1970, which had that universal message, attracted me. And so I've always been involved with that and um, spread the message that we are one family and we should live cooperatively. And that's what I've been trying to do.
Hearing your story reminds me of Isaac Asimov, and I was always fascinated by him as a writer. He wrote what, like 700 books or something like
A
that.
lot.
But one of my favorite books of all time, he wrote a book on humor, and he chose his 500 favorite jokes and he told them and explained why they were funny. And what was interesting about that, after I read the book, I wanted to learn more about him. So I went to get his autobiography. And I knew I was in trouble, Rod, when he had like 3 volumes of his autobiography. The first was 800 pages until the age of 17, I didn't want to read at anybody, first 17 years of his life, 800 pages. But
Wow.
he could certainly knock out a lot of pages.
Yeah.
But you're, yeah.
Some people have that skill. And in fact, I think every one of us, Blaine, you too, have a book inside them. Probably more than one book. I mean, if we examine our life, not even examine, if we just look at our lives and start writing what we know, don't they always say? the best writers are the ones who write what they know. Well, we're all the best writers because we can all write what we know, our experiences, what we've learned, what we've been taught, things like that. And you know what? It's pretty damn interesting because we're all so different.
Well, I don't know if you inspired me, Rod, but you perhaps did. So I've knocked out a couple of books, but they were joke books, you know. So I did joke books.
Yeah,
Then I had
yeah,
fun. I put together a book of quotes where I asked my friends to contribute quotes.
I
And
have that book.
okay, and that segues ironically into I, gu- I guess it was your latest book, but it's one that I want to talk to you a little bit about, and that you wrote a beautiful book with a great cover. And we'll talk about it. It's called Diamond Girl. And this
Yes.
was life and legacy of Janet Richards, your wife, but it was more than that. It was just like a very warm story. Where it's like I kind of got to know her a little bit. I haven't finished it completely, but what gave you the idea to write this book?
Well, when somebody like that dies in your life, your mate or your mother or father or close friend or something, and if you're like somebody like me, you have the gift of writing and it just comes naturally and you just naturally want to write, it wasn't hard to sit there and, put together these memories of our life together and just put them on the page. And I'm the kind of writer that hates long paragraphs, and there's no breaks. Oh man, I can't read that stuff. So I write in short bits that we can kind of eat very easily, and take in. And if we want to put it down and then go back to having a snack, we can do that. And that's my writing style. And that's how I wrote the book. So it's very easy to write. We were married 54 years. We were together 4 more years after that. Um, so when you've known someone that long, and live with them, of course, so closely, we've had children together. I mean, hey, there's a lot there. So it was pretty easy to come up with the book.
Well, in particular, I think I told you off the air, I liked, I was very impressed with all the tributes that you had as part of the book. And talk a little bit about how you got those.
Well, that was actually pretty easy too, but I had never seen it done before. But I think it's a good idea for a lot of people. Um, that and it could easily be done. For example, how many funerals, Blaine, have you gone to? And you've signed
Right.
the register, you know, and maybe you've dropped off a card and in the card you wrote something nice, right? Naturally. Well, all I did was I put together these these tributes that I had received by email, by card, by note. People told me, and I just laid them out. I just said, so and so said this, and so said that, and I decided to put them in the book. So half the book, or just about, is nice things said about my wife that actually are very true and very revealing in themselves.
Well,
So it made it interesting as well.
well, some people went much beyond a signature in a book. In other words, I read your friend, a mutual friend of ours, Bob Harris, for example, wrote it was a couple pages. It was something
Yes.
that he wrote, like, I guess, on his own, or he just chose one to write it.
He chose to write that. His wife Barbara was Janet's one of Janet's probably two best friends in the whole world throughout her whole life, and she wrote something as well. And I liked, my wife was an educator. She had her master's in education. She taught elementary school for 25 years, and she loved children. She loved youth. Um, and she had the kind of character and nature, just like the picture on her book, um, which made her very happy and effusive and energetic. And Sorry about that.
No, I mean, nothing to be sorry about. And talk about as you're mentioning it, talk about the cover because I told you I just loved it. And about, first of all, who helped you with the cover? Just,
Oh, yeah, and that's very good too.
yeah.
So here I am, Diamond Girl. I'm sorry about that. Diamond Girl was my eighth book, and for all my books, except the first one, actually, my son Jesse, who's a graphic artist and has a good job in Manhattan, lives in Manhattan, did all the covers. So he was the one who did the cover. And I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said, "Can I hire Jesse to do my book cover?" And I say, "Hey, wait a minute. He works and lives in Manhattan. You know how busy this guy is?" So I'm very incredibly lucky to get him to do my covers.
By the way, talk about the story behind the name. It's Diamond Girl. What was
Ah,
the story
Diamond
behind it?
Girl.
Yeah,
Yeah. Do you know where that comes from?
if you would.
Um, Many of you and your listeners should be familiar with a group from the 1970s called Seals and Crofts.
Okay,
They
sure,
were very popular. One of their most popular songs is called Summer Breeze.
sure.
And that's played on still on music stations today. And another one was called Diamond Girl. And if you look at the lyrics in Diamond Girl, they were perfect, a perfect description of my wife, Janet. And so that's what gave me the inspiration to call the book Diamond Girl. And
Okay.
as a side, I, Janet and I actually sat in Bob Harris's living room in Hamilton, New Jersey in about 1972 and had a private discussion and coffee and tea with Jimmy Seals and Dash Crofts.
Wait, how do you pull that off?
Well, Bob is a photographer,
Right.
and
Great stuff there.
Seals and Crofts used to give concerts all over and things like that, and they were in the area, and Bob invited them up and to put them up for the night, and that's how we pulled that off.
And did you see them in concert also when they were in
Oh
the
yeah,
area?
yeah. We traveled to all their New Jersey and PA concerts and danced in back in those days. You danced in the aisles.
So the, the name Diamond Girl, though, you didn't call her that after the fact with the book, or did you call her
That's
Diamond Girl?
after the fact in the book.
Okay, great story. The And then in terms of putting together these stories, it must have been it was a positive experience for you, or was it helpful for you
Yeah,
to?
helpful. I mean, the book starts out, Blaine, and maybe you'll remember this. I believe, and I think this goes back to part of my Catholic upbringing, that all human beings have a soul. That we have, even if you don't want to say a soul per se, we all have a spirit. And a lot of us, we exhibit that spirit through our personality. And, we all have a kind of like a different, our own personality, our own style and things. And I call that spirit. And so I believe that Janet's spirit never left me, even though she was buried and we placed her in the grave at the gravesite. Her spirit is still there with me. Um, so I'm not sad in the sense, I'm sad in the sense that physically she's gone. Um, but I'm not sad in the sense that she's gone because she is not gone. She's always with me. And you know yourself, your wife Cynthia, and all the people we know are always with us. Our parents are always with us. You know, we have it up here, we have it in here. So they're always with us.
When I say that because I believe in that too, Rod. That's how I remember my parents, for example. You remember them in your heart, um, and that's how they'll always be there. It's just kind of a nice way. I believe the same thing even with pets. That's how you remember your pets. They're in your heart, and says they die physically, but they're sort of always with us.
Sure.
Beautiful, beautiful thinking behind it. The So you write the book. How long did it take you to write the book?
Oh, geez, I don't know. 2 or 3 months, that's all.
Now, in terms of also being a publisher, do you then have somebody edit your work, or does somebody go through it, or you do it on your own?
Well, actually, the advice I give every writer is number one, write a good book.
Right.
Okay. Number one, you got to write a good book. But number two is hire a professional editor to get it perfect. You know, we live in a day and age where there's 18 million books on Amazon. 18 million. There are thousands published every day. So to differentiate and to say, oh, that's a good book, takes quite a bit of effort. And without a professional editor doing that work for you, your chances of being successful are slimmer. And so, for my memoir, I had a very good friend of mine, another writer, help me edit the book. And basically, from then on out, I have a full library full of books on writing and editing and publishing, um, probably about 150 books. And so I refer to those. And since then, I've edited my own work and edited very carefully. And you know what? There's still always a typo or this or that, something. Um, and that's just the nature of the game. But I've found success editing myself.
And editing other people. Where's AI fit into it?
AI does not. AI to me is, well, right now, especially with Janet's demise, she died from ALS and cancer, by the way, a year ago, actually, 2 weeks ago. Um, but AI to me has become almost a companion. It's kind of like having Alexa in your
Right.
home. You
Good
can talk
analogy.
to Alexa. You can say, Alexa, play some music. If you're depressed, you can say, Alexa, what drug does this um, mean? What does this drug do? Yeah, it's like having Alexa. So having AI, I use ChatGPT. I've used ChatGPT for over 2 years. Um, it's like having Alexa there, only on my PC, and it helps me with research, particularly. It's like having Wikipedia or whatever, these resources, these dictionaries, right there at your fingertip. And the whole key to using AI, I'll tell you, is very simple. Be very specific in what you want it to do for you, and you will get a reasonable and an intelligent answer.
I was going to ask you, since you mentioned it, how about with respect to editing? For example, you write something. Is it a good idea to run it through AI?
Yes and no. I mean, I would say AI can improve certain types of writing by about 50% by rephrasing, making sure that you have noun, verb, subject, sentence structure, things like that. AI can help quite a bit with writing, especially if you're not a good writer, say, so to speak. I should be pretty decent. I've written 9 books. I should be pretty decent by now, right? A fair to Midland writer. Um, so but I still use it. I have it on all the time. So I can click a key that says, yes, rephrase this. And I can look at that. And that's why I say about 50% of the time, especially for my emails, I might use what the AI says. But the rest of the time, no, I use what I want or I tweak it the way I want.
Two things I find annoying, Rod. with AI are one, in terms of sentence structure, and you can teach it not to do this, but they write everything in terms of threes, so they'll say, Rod, um, Rod Richard was a great guy, good looking, good looking and charming. And they always write it that way. And so I have to actually instruct AI, do not use patterns of three. Everything they do, they
Right,
do patterns
right,
of three. But worse though, I find AI makes mistakes, factual mistakes. And the other day I was writing a tribute to a friend of my wife's, and they had her wrong name. And then I wrote in the back, it says, how do you have a wrong name? And they apologized, but you really have to check it, in terms of what
right,
you put out. So you
right.
think it's like what automatically correct, but I don't know if you ever seen that where they'll make mistakes?
You know, I'll be honest with you, Blaine. I know they make mistakes. In
Yeah.
fact, I've had some instances, a few instances now. I've been using it 2 years. I use it every day, a couple times a day.
Me too.
I've had a few, maybe a handful of instances where it was an obvious mistake. The year was wrong, or the
Right.
name was wrong, or something, and I could easily see that. Um, but I'll be honest with you, for what I'm using it for, I am not seeing any mistakes.
Yeah. I've seen a couple. How about, I was wondering, I've never seen it done for poetry. I'm wondering, have you ever tried it for poetry?
It'll do a great job. Poetry, songwriting, whatever you want. Simple,
Right.
simple. Complex. There are different types of poetry, and I tend to write complex poetry. Sometimes a little prosy, if you will. I like to rhyme um, midline, not just at the end. Things like that. It's my style. It can't do stuff like that yet. It's pretty basic and simple.
Do you prefer writing prose or poetry?
I just prefer writing. I it doesn't matter. Um, I mean, when I compose an email, to me, it's just like writing a book or a letter or a poem. I know I've got to get it right. I've got to get the syntax right. I've got to get the elements right, the words right. I've got to make it clear. I've got to make it simple. I can't make compound sentences, that don't make sense. So to me, the basics are there no matter what I write. And I just love to write.
Talking about writing then, and you very nice sent me a copy of this book recently. Haven't gotten to read this one yet, but great title again, Knock, Open the Door. And by the way, let me ask you too, when you write a book, or a poem, what comes first, the book itself or the title?
Um, Interesting. I guess with me, my history's been pretty much the title comes first. In other words, I there's an inspiration, and that inspiration revolves around a theme, okay? And so that gives me the title. The title comes, or the theme comes, and then I tweak it as we go along.
So the reason I ask, interesting, again, kind of an interesting title. And by the way, did your son do the cover for this as
Yes,
well?
he did. Excellent. Yep.
Okay, we'll give him a shout out. So knock open the door. Where did you come up with the idea for this book?
Uh, you know, I guess that book was pretty easy to write because that book, 50% of that book contains letters that I've written over the course of the past year to various world leaders, to people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and Warren Buffett, and I mean just whoever. These people we all know well, and I've been telling them that it's time. for two things. One, for the people to rule the planet, not the leaders, not the governments, but for the people to actually run things. Now, we need to do that through an organization. I understand that. And we call that politics. But the state of politics today is abysmal around the world, not just in the US. In fact, the US is defined as quote unquote a flawed democracy.
Sure.
Not even a democracy, a flawed democracy. So, anyway, half the book contains those letters. The other half of the book contains what I felt, uh, and I admit in the book, ChatGPT helped me with the structure, a little bit of the outline for this, and that is a constitution that is from the people, by the people, for world, for the world to get its act together.
Now talk about then this book in terms of writing the letters. So two questions. One, how'd you get the addresses for the people? And
That's easy. ChatGPT or Google gives you all the addresses, the email addresses, the physical mail addresses, whatever you want.
do you send the letters email or physical?
I send them both.
Okay, because I tell people in general, you have a much better chance in general to writing anybody if you send them a personal handwritten note
Right.
as opposed to an email. And so out of all letters you've written, so how many letters in this book alone, how many letters are there approximately?
I would say there's at least 30 some.
Okay, out of the 30 you write, did you get any answers?
I did. I got some nice responses. You know, what you get when you write to people like this, you don't get personal answers, of course, because it's not a personal letter. You know, leaders and people in these positions don't look at what we write them as a personal letter. They look at it as, well, you're writing to me in this position.
Right.
You're not writing to me as Joe Blow, you know, your neighbor next door. You're writing to me in this position. So therefore, they let quote unquote their organization handle your letter and your response to it. You know, generally speaking, these days, what these people respond to only is a mass of letters.
Sure.
If they get 1,000 or 10,000 on one subject, they're going to react. They may look deeper into it and they may take some action. Um, so the chances of one letter getting through uh, their response system, their all generated automatic response system of handling people's letters, is very few. However, I wrote the book and I included those letters because, quite frankly, I don't think there's any more important subject in the world today, not even the environment, as bad as it is, except for achieving a permanent world peace.
Yet, as you talk about it, I'll mention an idea that I would share with my students, and I still tell people this, that if you want to get a response, write, first of all, handwrite it or type it, whatever you do, but also tie into something that either asks a question or their interest, aside from world peace. But I don't know if you've ever done this, Rod, but if I read a nonfiction book, half the time I'll write a letter to the author, and I'd say maybe half of that time I'll get a response, because people don't write. I'll ask you as an example. Do you ever get letters from people who read your books?
No, I have not actually.
Okay. And so one thing I tell people, I'll put you on the spot to see if I see it, and most people don't do this. I always contend, and you share this with your authors, on the last page of the book, they should put a contact information, so they can go through the publisher, of course, they can try, but you want to make it easier for people. Tell people, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a note, and
That's true.
it's just
You
kind of,
are right about that.
but it's just kind of a fun thing to get a response, from somebody. You don't get a lot of responses, but when you do, it's very, very exciting, that somebody takes time and effort.
Yes.
But your point
Yes.
is spot on.
But that's you and me, Blaine.
Right.
That you and me are individuals. We're in a very small
Oh,
world.
sure. Right.
Okay. So yes, it's very, but to these people who are getting thousands of
Yeah.
letters,
On topic. Yeah.
it's not meaningful. You know, what's meaningful to them is if somebody they know calls them, oh, they'll answer you see what I'm saying? It's quite different. And so how we approach them has to be quite different.
And you gave a great example of it when you're talking about the Diamond Girl, the story behind that, that Bob got a personal response because he wrote them. It was a personal nature. And to actually come meet him, that was pretty exciting,
Yeah,
that they responded. So
it does happen, and you know it because you've done it hundreds of times.
well, as a kid, same thing too. I would write letters. I got it from my grandfather. He always write letters. I always remembered it, Rod, that he would write a letter to a restaurant if he liked the food, and they would put it up in a frame on
Yeah,
on their wall. And it always made an impact on me. And to this day, I still do that.
yeah,
It's kind of a nice thing to say to somebody, I recognize you or I appreciate you. That's
yes,
something I don't know about you, Bob, but I can tend also it's easy to bitch about world peace, you name a topic. But
right.
I tell people you can complain all you want, but for every complaint letter you write or bitch letter, you have to write 10 positive ones. So it's
Well,
just awful.
I even recommend in the book, don't even bother. Do not write those bitch letters. Do not write letters that say, I demand you do this. I demand, because immediately, hey, if I got that letter, I'd throw it out. I would throw it in the garbage. Why would I pay attention to that?
Yeah.
No, what we need to do though is to agree on something that is positive and that will result in something positive. In other words, if you write somebody and say, I'm complaining about this, however, a possible solution might be if you did blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? You'll get more attention. I mean, we need to come up with the solutions, not just complain and bitch about the problems.
The spin on this was my favorite politician. I don't know if you ever heard of him, a guy by the name of Allard Lowenstein. And
Mm.
he led he was my first congressman as a kid, and he led the Dump Johnson movement. But what so impressed me about him, Rod, is he would run public forums and on, for example, abortion was a very hot topic. And he would get people to come to an agreement on certain things. So rather than fight and say you're a jerk all the time, what can we agree to? And I just
Yes.
always was impressed by that to get people on the same wavelength, but find fault with the person all the time.
And that fits exactly into what you taught me as a court mediator all those years ago, to find some points of agreement between these two disputing parties,
Yeah.
you know, so that we could maybe get to some point where we can put the dispute behind us and move forward.
It's funny, you still remember that. Yeah. And the whole idea especially neighborhood disputes, was to be able to get along with your neighbor and still be friendly with
Yeah,
them, not
yeah.
fight them all these years. It's funny things you remember. Thank you for sharing that. Rob, let me ask you this. So you have 9 books down. Um, what's next for Rod Richards? Do you
What's
know?
next? Well, actually, what's next is I'm going to be spending the next probably at least 6 months um, promoting this idea that, we need to not just talk about, not just think about, we need to take action to achieve a permanent world peace now. So I'm creating a website as we speak tomorrow, or the next day it'll be going up, called Peace by 2030. And that is a campaign that I'm going to be pushing. I'm going to be following up with all these people I wrote letters to in my book, and I'm going to be sending them copies of my book and another letter, and this one perhaps a little bit more um, compelling, and try to get this idea out because we can do it. It's not like we can't do it. We can do it. If we can unite and what? Um, Cut up a tree that's fallen across the road and get it out of the way so we can get the cars. If we can do stuff like that, you know what? We can achieve world peace. The thing is, we do millions of things every day to take care of people, right? And it's all about taking care of people. Well, that's the most important thing because if we can't ensure a world peace, we're never gonna make it.
On that, Rod, down the road, let's do another show on that, or when you get the website off the ground, you get this off the ground. Love to talk to you more about that. But let me ask you this, in terms of the book and this project by 2030, did you ever want to run for office?
Well, that's a very interesting thing. I know, all your listeners know, unfortunately, and it was this way before uh, the current political situation. Politics has always been, unfortunately, divisive. One side says this, the other side opposes, blah, 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 goes back and forth. There was a time in this country when we actually had consensus,
Right.
when Congress agreed to pass Medicare and Social Security and programs that meant a difference. We have a Congress. We can do it when we have to. But those days are far and far long gone, essentially. And this is not just happening here, it's around the world
So,
because of this disunifying force. Um, and we that's what part of world peace means is learning how to cooperate again, much like mediation taught me how to get two parties in a room and help them learn to cooperate and stop fighting.
Rod, if anybody wants to get in touch with you for a bunch of reasons, first of all, to find out about your books, what's best bet to find out about your books?
You can Google me, Rodney Richards. Just put it in Google and some things will come up and you'll be able to contact me. You can contact me by email 1950 ablia at gmail.com, 1950 ablia at gmail.com, or I have a current website, just rodneyrichards.info, and I'll be having more things coming out soon.
Okay, if they go there, will they also find all your books on that
Yes,
website? Okay, so anyway, Rodney, as always, pleasure to speak to you. And hopefully, I don't know when I'll be up in your neck of the woods, but maybe we'll get you to come to North Carolina one of these days.
I'm going down to New Orleans next month,
Are
so
you
you
really?
never know. One of these days, I'm traveling. I already made a cross-country trip on Route 66 and came back. That took 13 days, so I'm
Yeah.
I'm raring to go.
I remember that trip, and that was in your first book, right? Or the memoir.
No, 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 that was recent. That was very recent.
Oh, because in your memoir too, you talked about a trip you also went just on your own. You packed up one day and went to, was it
Well,
India?
I went to Israel, the Holy Land, and yeah, had some experiences there. Yes.
Anyway, Rod, as always, pleasure, and I look forward to hopefully one of these days bumping into you
And
again.
thank you very much for seeing me and listening to me and being such a good friend all these years, Blaine. I appreciate it. You're doing great things.
Okay, it's always a pleasure. Speak to you soon, buddy. Be
All
well.
right.